Apple just knows how to make the most premium feeling phones out there, and the iPhone 13 Pro is no exception to that rule. Now, it may not have any fancy perks like a folding screen or a completely bezel-less display, but for what it does pack, Apple still goes above and beyond. For example, even though the 13 Pro is a lot smaller than most Android flagships out there, somehow it still weighs more, and that heavier weight gives it a much more premium feel while you're holding it. Another example where Apple goes above and beyond is by using a stainless steel frame instead of an aluminum one, which is what most of its competitors use. I'm also a sucker for flat displays, especially since glass screen protectors are 10 times easier to install and they're barely noticeable. And I know most people go for the Max model, but I've always been the one to choose the smaller Pro variant because it's cheaper, easier to use with one hand, and aside from a slight difference in battery capacity and charging speed, it's the exact same phone, like down to the processor and cameras. But with all those positives on the design, there are still a few caveats that make my OCD levels yell for help. Things like the stainless steel edges being extreme fingerprint magnets, or the enormous protruding camera module on the back that likes to collect dust near the edges of the lenses and provides wobble when the phone is flat on its back. The side buttons do have great placement, but they are not as tactile or clicky as I like them to be, and they are hard to find at times being that they're so flat. Even though the boxy form factor brings a lot of nostalgia from back in the days with the iPhone 5, I can't help but notice that the sharp edges constantly push up against my fingertips, making it a bit uncomfortable to hold for long periods, and it also provides a good amount of friction, making it harder for my hands to maneuver around the phone. It's not a huge deal though, I just prefer the curved edges that most Android phones have for a more comfortable hold. When trying to unlock the phone with Face ID, for the most part, it did a fantastic job at recognizing my face and unlocking it quickly. Even if my phone was an arm length away, really up close, or off to the side. Another big underlying difference between an iPhone and an Android is the software. Some of my favorite exclusives from iOS, or just features that iOS does better than Android, include Notification Summary, which lets you hide all of your unimportant notifications until the time comes to send them in a batch and let you read all of them at once when you're not busy. Gets rid of those unnecessary dings that make you lose your train of thought for no reason. You can also drag and drop data across apps, making the process of sharing a photo from one app to another a lot quicker. iMessage is also all around better than Google Messages, that's no surprise, but one new feature that stood out to me is that when you send multiple photos at once, iMessage will stack them on top of each other so that you don't need to scroll through a giant exhausting list of photos. Plus, it makes it easier to save them. The weather app on iOS 15 is also way better than the stock weather app on most Androids, and that's because Apple bought up the famous dark sky weather app. Another neat underrated iOS feature is called Hide My Email, which lets me generate a fake email address so that whenever I'm filling out an online form or signing up for a newsletter, I don't have to use my real email. Then any incoming emails that I receive from that newsletter that I signed up for will get forwarded to that fake inbox I created. If I start receiving spam from them, I can just burn that fake email address to stop them quickly. Super creative and useful. I still love using the basic exclusives like FaceTime, which I'm glad that Apple now lets Android users in on the fun through a link to use on the web browser. To top it off, many social media apps like TikTok or Snapchat provide way better picture quality on the iPhone than on Android, and that's because on iPhones, those apps actually use the camera's main sensor to take photos or videos. On Android, the apps just screen capture the camera's live video feed, giving you a potato shot. All in all, I enjoyed my time with iOS and I appreciated a lot of the unique features that came with it. It's a pleasant interface to use and it's very straightforward that even a toddler can learn to use it. In terms of performance, this phone is the fastest phone I've ever used, period. It's even slightly faster than the Galaxy S21 Ultra and Google Pixel 6 Pro. There's just something about Apple's software that makes scrolling and navigating through the interface buttery smooth. Of course, it feels even faster now since it finally supports 120Hz, but I'm not gonna lie, even before when it didn't support ProMotion and only carried a 60Hz panel, it still felt as smooth as an Android with a higher refresh rate. It's really about the combination of an excellent touch latency and a well-developed UI that makes for a buttery smooth experience. Because on other cluttered softwares like One UI, a 60Hz refresh rate is much more noticeable. Overall, a massive round of applause to Apple on the performance. I also had a good time shooting photos with the iPhone 13 Pro. The quality really impressed me, especially at night, but honestly, that's no surprise. I mean, just look at the size of that camera module. It's huge. If that thing ever provided mid-range shots, I'd be furious, probably chuck my phone across the room. Nah, I'm just kidding. But seriously, it takes up so much space on the back and my index finger practically lives on that ultra-wide lens whenever I use the phone. Now I get why those lenses are so big though. It's really just to improve low-light photography and it's definitely helped. D-light shots are still really spectacular and do a fantastic job of capturing anything that's in front of you as naturally as possible, but the results aren't that much different from its previous predecessors. In good lighting, there's hardly any difference between pictures taken on the iPhone 13 Pro and a 3-year-old iPhone like the XS. Nighttime shots are where the real changes occurred. The rear sensors have no problems exposing a dark region and barely providing any image noise. It may not be as detailed as the Pixel 6 Pro since it doesn't carry as high of a megapixel count, but it did do a much better job at making dark environments look naturally dark instead of just brightening everything up trying to make it look like it's daytime. Video recordings were also fantastic on this phone. It can shoot up to 4K with 60 FPS, and with that, no matter the lighting, colors always looked fantastic, stabilization was on point, and you get the extra addition of ProRes. The camera app also came with a new video mode called Cinematic, which honestly made my video recordings look a bit better when recording a subject. It used a ton of bokeh to focus on the subject, and also did slower focus pulling to make the shot look like something out of a movie. It's really neat. But it definitely needs some improvements because sometimes it randomly defocuses on areas and the outlines of a person aren't always as smooth as I like them to be. Either way, those are just minor nitpicks. Video recordings in general on the iPhone were one of the best that I've ever seen on a smartphone yet. Overall, the cameras on the iPhone did provide the complete package, especially with the trio lenses. You'll be able to capture anything that's in front of you really well, no matter how big or small it is, and no matter if it's bright or dark out. The battery was not as impressive as I thought it would be. Obviously, results may vary, and if you get the Max model, you may see better results, but for me, I'd usually get around 5 to 6 hours of screen time. That's not bad, but that's about average nowadays, and I've definitely seen better. The phone could easily last me through the entire day with moderate use of social media, entertainment, and messaging. Usually it'll end me around 15 to 20%. But if we turn up the notch and start playing games for a few hours, then going down a giant rabbit hole with TikTok, or even just using maps for a long drive, get ready to pull out that charger. And that same charger still doesn't support USB-C and only charges at a rate of 23 watts. Bruh. It's super annoying because sometimes I have places that I need to be, and this phone likes to take its sweet time just to charge halfway. It legit takes around an hour and 45 minutes to completely juice up this phone from 0 to 100%. That's insane, especially since there are phones out there like the OnePlus 9 Pro that really charge up completely at twice that speed. So let's wrap it up. Is the iPhone 13 Pro worth it? Honestly, I think it is if you're coming from a 2-year-old phone, because aside from the mediocre battery life and charging speed, this phone is the complete package and you will notice a decent difference. You can even choose to get the Max model over this one and the battery life may improve a bit, so that's where I stand with the iPhone 13 Pro.